Okay, guys, are you ready for it? This is lesson M8, lesson 9.5, the quadratic formula. So just like we had the distributed property, now we have the quadratic formula. So this strategy will solve all possible quadratic equations that have real answers. I know you're like, well, aren't they all real? No. There are some that are imaginary. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use that idea of completing the square, and we're going to do it on the standard form of the quadratic formula. And when we're done, bum-ba-da-dum, we will have the quadratic formula. So how about that? So let's go ahead and we'll start with standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I'm just going to label things over here on the right. Standard form of a quadratic equation. Okay. And again, we're going to use complete the square. Okay, so there's a couple debates. There's two ways you could start it. You can start by getting the constant over to the right first, or you can start by getting the quadratic coefficient to equal 1. I'm going to do it with the quadratic coefficient first. So that's going to be our first step. We're going to get a equal to 1. Okay, to do that, we're just going to divide everything by a. And by everything, every term, both sides of the equation. So that gives me x squared plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0. Okay. Next, we're going to get the constant alone. On the right. Now, every time I say right and left, I am talking about the equation and what side of the equal sign things should be. So we're going to subtract c over a from both sides. So we have x squared plus b over ax, and then equals negative c over a. So now we're going to complete the square. Okay, so that's the next step, is to complete the square. And to do that, we're going to be messing with our quadratic, or our linear term. So I'm just going to write linear coefficient cut in half, then square. Okay, so we got that piece, and then you would add to both sides of the equation. I'm just going to abbreviate equation. Okay, so we're going to take the b over a, we're going to cut it in half, and that gives me b over 2a. Then we're going to take that, we're going to square it, okay, which is going to be b squared over 4a squared. And then we're going to take that guy and we're going to add it to both sides of the equation. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is the left side is good. The right side, though, we're going to have to combine those terms. In order to combine those terms, we are going to need to find a common denominator. So we're going to combine the fractions on the right. common denominator. Denominator, there we go. Okay. So let's see. In order to do this, my c, or my negative c over a, needs to have a denominator of 4a squared. So it's missing a 4 and an a. So a 4 and an a. Now, at this juncture, we're at x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared equals, and now I'm going to go ahead and put the positive number in front, the b squared, minus, and then c times 4a is 4ac, and the common denominator is 4a squared. Okay, at this point, we're going to go ahead and factor the trinomial. So let's see, let's do factor the trinomial. Okay, so remember when we factor the trinomial, it's going to be the square root of the x squared, which is going to be x. It's going to be the square root of the b squared over 4a squared. So square root of b squared is b. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of a squared is a. Now, do you recognize where that comes from? So I'm going to draw a little arrow. See this guy here? That's what shows up in the binomial. Now, we're going to have a plus. We're going to square it. And then we still have the b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Okay? Now, we need to solve. So to do that, we're going to take the square root. Let's do this guy. Of both sides. So we're going to take the square root of x, the quantity x plus b over 2a squared. Now remember, because I'm putting it over a variable, remember a, b, and c are not variables, they're numbers. I have to put plus or minus in front of that. Okay, so when I do that, I get x plus b over 2a, the quantity, a quantity squared. When I take the square root, I just get the quantity. And then over on the other side, I'm going to get plus or minus. Now the b squared minus 4ac, it is not anything I can take a square root of because it's a binomial, and so I can't take the square root of a piece of it, but I can take the square root of the denominator. So square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a. Last but not least, we're going to get, let's do solve for x. So we're going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. And you have x equals the negative of b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. Now, imagine for just a moment that you cover up, let's see, I'm going to do it with a highlighter, that you cover up from the plus or minus square root of b squared over ac. Do you see what you get? X equals negative b over 2a. Whoa! Yep, that, my friends, is the formula for the axis of symmetry. I told you you were going to find out where it came from. That's where it comes from. All right, I'm going to remove that. Now, I'm going to sing you a little ditty, and then we're going to do a couple practice, and we'll be done. So, you got to memorize this sucker. It works. It takes long time, and you'll see that when we do our sample problems. However, when you cannot factor it through other means, this is a good solution, better than completing the square. So, here is the song. x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So be ready, because I'm going to make you sing it. All right, let's go to the next page and let's do a couple practice problems. So the directions are going to, oops, sorry, I'm still in that. Let's go to him and let's erase that. Sorry about that. Directions are going to say solve using the quadratic formula. So you don't get an option. Okay, got to use the quadratic formula. So we get x squared minus 12x equals 20, or negative 20. So here's the dealio. First off, if it's not in standard form, I can't use quadratic formula, because I got to identify A, B, and C. Signs are going to matter. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Second, you might be able to factor this through other means. However, the directions say you have to use quadratic formula. Okay? So we have x squared minus 12x plus 20 equals 0. So now we're going to identify our three key players. Remember when we were doing that earlier, we never used C. Well, now we get to. Okay, and here we go. I start by writing the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then I just start substituting numbers in. Negative of the 12, negative 12, sorry, that's your negative b, plus or minus square root. Then we have b squared, so negative 12 squared, minus 4, and then we're going to multiply by a, which is 1, and c, which is 20, and then all over 2, and then a, which is 1. Okay? So here we go. X equals 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus 80 all over 2. X equals 12 plus or minus the square root. Let's see, we get a 4. 14 take away 8 is 6 all over 2. We have x equals 12 plus or minus the, oops, sorry, I don't need to do square root. I can take the square root. Square root of 64 is 8 all over 2. Now I have two possibilities. X can equal 12 plus 8 over 2, or x can equal 12 minus 8 over 2. So we solve both of those, and we get x equals 20 over 2, which equals 10, and x equals 4 over 2, which equals 2. So my solution set contains 10 and 2. So here's the dealio. That's the second time I said dealio. Oh well. You could have factored this playing the game. Factors of 20 that add to give me negative 12 would have been negative 10 and negative 2. But we didn't have a choice. All right, let's do the next one. So we have 10x squared minus 5x equals 25. So now we have a bit of a problem here. So first thing is we've got negative 25, negative 25. Can you imagine if we had to do completing the square on this? Divide everything by 10, cut in half a fraction. Oh yeah, all joy. We have 10x squared minus 5x minus 25. So the great news is, with this guy, I just take the A, B's, and C's. It doesn't matter, right? So I have A equals 10, B equals negative 5, C equals negative 25. So then we have x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Then we just start substituting numbers in. X equals negative b, which is negative 5. And then plus or minus square root. And then we have, well, that's terrible. Let me write that again. b squared minus 4ac. So let's see, that's going to be 10 and negative 25. And then all over 2a. And then we just start doing math. X equals negative 5 plus or minus square root 25. Now I have two negatives. That's going to be a positive. 4 times 25 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. Oof. Oops, sorry, went too far. Only here. All over 20. All right, so we're going to go ahead and negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 1,025 over 20. So now I'm going to try to factor 1,025. Well, it ends in a 25, so that means 25 can go into it. How many times? I don't know. Let's do it off to the side. It goes into 104 times with 2 left over. That's good. Bring down the 5. And it goes into itself once. So 25 times 1. So I can take the square root of 25 and the square root of 41. So that gives me x equals negative 5 plus or minus square root of 25 is 5. And we have the leftover square root of 41 all over 20. Now, this leads us to our answer, which is why we talked about simplifying square roots, which is what we've done. But now we have this fraction, and we need to see if we can reduce to lowest terms. So here's the only way I can do it. There are 3 numbers. Okay, 3 numbers. So what I need to do is I need to take out the common. Oh, you know what I did wrong? That's not, let me correct that. Negative and a negative is a positive. So this guy's a positive 5. Forgot about that, sorry. So I have to look at the 3 outside numbers and see what they have that they have in common. And what I notice is that they have a 5 in common. So because there is a 5 in common, I can divide a 5 out of each one of them. If every term has 5 divided out of it, I'm good. I don't have to put it anywhere. I don't have to hold it anywhere. So I get a 1, I get a 1, and I get a 4. So x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 41 all over 4. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that can be your answer, unless the book requires you to take that answer and let's say round it to the nearest tenth. So this could be the solution set, 1 plus square root of 41 over 4, or 1 minus the square root of 41 over 4. So now this is when you would need a calculator or a square root table. And if you were asked round to the nearest tenth, this is what we would do. First, we're going to look up what the square root of 41 is. Now, every table I've seen goes only 3 digits after the decimal point. So it's 6.403. So then I would go ahead and I would, let's see, should I have 2? You know what, I'm going to take it to the top where I have more room. Okay? So then this becomes 1 plus or minus 6.403 all over 4. That's what my x is going to equal. So now I'm going to split it into its 2 possible answers. So I get 1 plus 6.403 over 4 and 1 minus 6.403 over 4. So when I add, I get 7.403 over 4, and I get negative 5.403 over 4. Now 4 goes into 3 once with 3 left over, and then there's the decimal point. 4 goes into 34 8 times, which is 32, with 2 left over. And then 4 goes into 24 5 times evenly. And honestly, that's as far as I need to go. Why? Because I'm going to round to the nearest 10th. All I need to go is 1 past the 10th. So I get 1.9. Okay, that's an approximated answer. All of these are approximated at this point. The exact answer was the original one that still had the square root in it. All right, so this guy, I'm going to get a negative answer. 4 goes into 5 once with 1 left over. 4 goes into 14 3 times, which is 12 with 2 left over. 4 goes into 25 times, and then that's where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to round to the nearest 10th. So the hundredths is the 5. 5 says, yep, 3 can go up. And we get the second answer would be approximately negative 1.4. So we get 2 possible answers 2 different ways, depending whether I want the exact answer or I want an approximate answer. Okay, so then I can... All right, do I need to include those about equal to's? No, I do not. Okay, all right, so that is what we have for you. Good luck with this, guys. Bye now.